names.
My name is Leila Sayers, and I'm 95 years old. I was born in Charleston on October the 19th, 1921, and I lived there the first year of my life. And then my mother and father decided to move up to Salters and move in with my grandmother and uncle. So we moved up back to Salters after I was a year old.
My name is Martha Jane Sayers Shira, and they call me Jean. And I was born on January the 4th, 1936, and I'm 81 years old. And my sister is Leila, and she is going to tell why I'm called Jean when my real name is Martha Jane.
We named her Martha Jane after my grandmother, but I liked Jean Harlow, who was a movie star at the time. And so I said, no, I want her named Jean. You can name her Martha Jane, but I want to call her Jean. So all her life, up to her 80 years, 80 some odd years, she's been known as Jean. And I love her very much. I've always loved her, and we've been very close.
Oh, I love you too. Now tell a little bit about your days in Salters as a young child growing up.
Well, what story you want me to
Well, tell about maybe the schoolhouse that's still remaining and where we both went to school, and when you went, tell about your experiences as a student.
Well, it was a two-story brick building, and it is still there. They're talking about selling the brick, but I don't know whether they're going to do that or not. And I went to school there for 9 years. And back when I finished high school, they had 11 grades. So I had to stay up here for 9 years and then move to King Street for the 10th and the 11th grade.
Well, when I went to school in Salters, in the same building that's still standing today, my teacher was Sarah Odom Salters. And Salters is named after that family. And her mother, at the time Leila was there, or either my mother, was attending school in another building. She was the principal, Leila Ferguson Salters. And when she married, she did marry a Salters, and they have lived here in the Salters plantation until they passed away, and the family had lived there for years and years, and it's a beautiful old home located in Salters. And I went through the 4th grade, and then I went to King Street and entered it. And coming from the country in a small town like Salters, I was just lost, and I was so afraid. But I had some friends that carried me through, and I went through the 12th grade. And from there, I went on to Carolina and took a course in secretarial science for 2 years. And I returned to Salters, and I've been here ever since.
Well, since we talked about Jean's name, I'll tell you that I was named after my father's sister, had a sister named Leila, and so did my mother. She had a sister named Leila, and that's where my name came from. And when I went through the 9th grade in Salters and finished King Street, the 10th and 11th grade, I went to Carolina for a year and took a business course. And then I went down to Charleston and went to Rice Business College. And then I went to work. After that, I went to work in Charleston.
How did you get to school in early years? Did you go on a bus to school?
Yeah, I went on a bus to school, and we weren't taught as much as over in King Street. If you came in on the bus, you just weren't taught as much of us.
Now, when you were younger, your name was Leila, and your aunt's names were Leila. Was there ever confusion from your mother which Leila she was talking about when she would
No,
talk?
no.
Did they call you Little Leila?
Yes, they did. They called me
That's
Little
almost a
Leila.
tongue twister.
And then also, I
Little
have a
Leila.
namesake in Charleston that is my great-granddaughter. She's named Leila Marie, so I have a namesake.
Mhm.
But the Marie is after her mother. Well, I'm gonna tell you a few things that happened around the house. We had a man that lived here in one of the houses in the yard. He was a black man, and his name was Kelly. You don't remember Kelly, do you?
No, I don't.
And Kelly and James went out one day. Kelly was a handyman, and he went out one day with James, my Uncle James, and they went to the barn to shuck some corn for the chickens, because we had chickens and we had cows and we had a horse. And so they were sitting there shucking the corn, and the corn shucker had 2 holes in it to put 2 ells of corn in it. And they would put the corn in, and all of a sudden, James, he jumped up and started dancing a jig. And then Kelly said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And James said that he said a mouse ran up one side of my pants and down the other, and said it just excited me. And Kelly said, "Oh my goodness, I done thought you going crazy." That was just one instant. And we had a colored woman that cooked for us, and she lived out in the yard, and she had a number of sisters, but she had one sister that was named after each aunt, and she taught me the names of her sister, all of the names that she had, and it was Cinderella, Overdilla, Penderilla, Basilla, Mary Ann, Christmas Brown. And I said, "Well, Belinda, what did you call her?" She said, "We just call her Cindy."
That's great.
What else did I
That
do?
was funny. Tell about the joggling board, which was during our days when we were young, and we all played on the joggling board. I have one at my house now that I had made. But tell about when you and Marion were on the joggling board.
Now, how
Okay.
old were you at this time? Give us an idea of what age you were.
What
You're
age
talking,
I was?
You were a teenager?
Well, I was a teenager, and Marion was younger. He was 6 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so must have been about 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he got on the joggling board too, and he straddled the board, put one leg on each side, one on the other. And the night before, my grandmother had chickens, and some of them were in the yard, and one of them had gotten on the joggling board the night before and left a little present. And Marion, he got right by and just right back of that, and he was jumping, it was bumping him up and down, and all of a sudden I just stopped and made the joggling board just stop all of a sudden, and it made him go over from his waist down, and his face went right into that
Into the mess.
poo the chicken left the night before, and it made him right angry with me for doing that.
That's wonderful.
What else you want to hear?
Well, tell about maybe when you went to Shawfield and met Jim, your husband, and tell about your early adult life. And
Well, I worked for the government for 35 years in many different places, but I had 35 years when I retired, and one of the places I worked was Shawfield, and I went to work at Shawfield, and I moved in with this girl that was living with this doctor and his wife, and she got me a date with her. She went with his first sergeant, and so she got the first sergeant to get me a date, and he brought Jim, and we were all standing in the kitchen there that belonged to the home we were voted in, and Jim was in there, and I thought, that's a good-looking boy, and I thought, this might be it. But I started dating him then, and he went home on a furlough, and he invited me to come out and visit with them. And so I had to tire me at night. First, I got on the train, on the bus, and rode as far as Dallas. In Dallas, I got on a plane and flew to Amarillo. And then the next day, let me get it straight down. I left Columbia on the bus, and I went to Dallas, and I got on a plane, and he met me in Amarillo, Texas. And the last way I went was on a train. So I tried the bus, the train, and the airplane. And I said, well, if there had been a boat going, I guess I'd have tried that one too to get out there. Anyway, Jim was waiting on me, and I was real happy. And on the way back he lived in Littlefield, Texas, which was about 100 or so miles from Amarillo, or maybe more. And he, on the way home, on the way to his house, he proposed to me that night. And I said, yes, right. I didn't even stop and think about it, because I knew that he was it.
He was the one. And
so we got married while I was out in Texas. He had a good friend named they were the Garys. It was a couple, and they went with us. He grew up with the boy, Burl was his name, and he and his wife went with us, and we were married in Clovis, New Mexico. Just the four of us were there, and the preacher and his wife. And it so happened that the preacher's wife was from North Carolina, so we had a nice little conversation with her. And then we went on through the mountains, and Burl had borrowed his father's car, so the four of us rode in that car. And so they said, well, we haven't been married but 6 months. They said, we'd just go on another honeymoon. So they went with us when we went on our honeymoon. We went to Carlsbad Cabins too, and went down to the bottom of the cabins and enjoyed that. It was a very enjoyable trip. Beside being the honeymoon.
Well, how old were you when you got married, Leila? I don't remember.
Oh, I've forgotten too.
You were 20.
23.
23.
I was 23 and I weighed 123 pounds.
And you had 2 children, and what were their names?
One was named Amy Lynn Faust and Leila Adrian Faust. 2 girls, and I would have loved to have had a boy for Jim, but that wasn't the Lord's will, so.
Well, you moved back to Salters after you were in Sumter, and you've been here ever since, right?
Yeah, I moved back after 35 years of working with the government from place to place, and I moved back to Salters, and I've been here
you
ever
brought
since.
a Texan back to Salters. He was from Littlefield, Texas. And you talked him into coming back here.
Yeah.
And you lived here until now.
Mm-hmm. And had a wonderful life. He was a prince of a fellow. I couldn't have done better. And I waited and looked for a better husband, because it wasn't such a thing. And I miss him greatly. He's been gone now for 11 years.
11 years.
11 years on February the 20th.
Just a few days ago.
He had cancer.
Yep.
And I loved him to death. I still miss him terribly. What else you talk about?
Well, I'll tell a little bit.
Tell about your bicycle ride.
Well, no, I'll tell about my life here as growing up. And I was a teenager, and I grew up here in Salters, and it was such a nice little community. We could go out at night and we could play, ain't no bears out tonight. Daddy killed them all last night. And we would go and hide in the bushes, and they would try to see who could find us. And whoever did, then they had to be the one that shut their eyes and looked for the ones that were hiding in the bushes. But we had a lot of things we did. I know I was growing up in Saldus with all the boys, so I was the tomboy. And I was rough and ready, and I was in love with someone that was 10 years older than me, and I was about 10 at the time, and I would tell that I was going to marry Gordon McCullough and have 10 little Gordons. I was going to chew tobacco, and I was going to spit on anybody that made me mad. I had a lot of feist in me, and this sweet sister of mine can tell you when I got mad, everybody needed to get away.
Did you always get along as sisters?
We did.
Oh, never fought.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
fought.
had our differences.
I had fallen off I rode a bicycle, and I had hit a rock in front of the house right here, and it threw me over the handlebars and knocked me out. And I had Ted McCullough, who was another one of my friends that I played with. He picked me up and brought me in the house, and when I came to, I was lying on the sofa, and I didn't remember what had happened, but I had hurt my arm, and you asked about disagreements and fights. Well, my sweet sister was up in the bathroom smoking. She was trying to hide from her mother, and I wanted to go in and see what was going on. So I pushed on the door, and she said, "Go downstairs with Mother and leave us alone. Me and my friend are up here." Well, I got my hurt arm in the door, and she slammed the door on my arm. I screamed so loud, my mama came running, and she smelled the smoke.
And you were in trouble.
And I grew up here, as I said before, and it was a wonderful life. And the people here are like one big family. Our faith is strong. We attend Union Presbyterian Church, where a lot of our relatives are buried. And we're just like one big family. From the day I was born until today, we're still one family. And we loved all the excitement and the groups back when we were young and didn't have TV and iPhones and all the technology that's available today. We would sit on the porch at night, and Mother would invite all her friends, and we'd shell butter beans. And she would put them in the freezer, and that's the way she got her work done. And then on the days when we had what was called hog killing days, they would butcher the hogs, and in the backyard they would have a pipe running from the fork in one tree to the fork in the other tree, and they would hang the butchered pigs and hogs up there. And then they had a big black pot that we boiled the rinds and made lard. And I can remember back when we had to do that, and we would use the lye soap to scrub with and whatnot, and that was back in, I would say, in the early 50s or late 40s. And we also had that, and it was very good because all the neighbors came to help, and Mother would make liver pudding and hog head cheese, and she would have cracklings, and all the different things that would come from the pig were used. And we had a smokehouse where she hung the sausage to dry and cure, and the hams. And we lived mostly off the land. She had chickens and eggs and all the different things that farmers had, and we used the products that were handy. A garden, and we did different things that we didn't have to buy because money was scarce back then. And during the war, I can remember as a child that they would give coupons, and you had to have so many coupons to get 5 pounds of sugar. And it went on like that. The different coupons were used to purchase things, and without them you couldn't buy it. So we were very conservative and used all the different the different ways to not have to spend money.
I'd like to tell you about my horse ride. We were having a ball game that day across the railroad track. That was an open field, and there was a number of people that playing ball. And Robert Bell from Lanes came up on his horse, and the horse looked real tame. He was a very quiet horse, and so I said, "Well, Robert, could I ride him?" And he said, "Sure." So when I went in one direction, the horse did fine, but when I turned around and started back, the horse decided that he was going to go back to Lanes where he lived, and he took off and he started running, and I did everything to stop him.
Go ahead.
I did everything to stop him, and I couldn't stop him. And I saw this black man walking down the road, and I said, "Stop him!" And he jumped out and tried to grab the reins, but he missed it. And it's a good thing he did, because I don't know what it would have done to him, because the horse was running real fast. And so it did slow him down a little bit, and he turned and jumped this ditch over on a dirt road. And I thought, well, now this is the time for me to get off of this horse. So I threw my leg over and jumped off, and I said, "God, save me." And then when I came to, the ball game had been broken up, and they were all there with me, and they said they would stand me up, and I'd just sit back down. I wouldn't stand up. But I was so bummed up for about a week or so after that. And I said, but Robert said, "Get back up on this horse," after they caught it out in the woods. And I said, "Get back on." I wouldn't get back on that horse for anything. It stood up on its back legs and went, and I said, "No way." Until this day, I have never been back on another horse. That was my last horse ride.
Well, that was growing up in Salters, and we, as you know, we all had a very good time. We had fun, and it was great. And I went on to work after college, and my mother didn't want me to stay here, so she called the medical university to see if it was any openings for any type of work down there. She was going to send me to the medical college to work and marry a doctor. But that didn't happen. I started seeing Carlisle Shira from Lanes, which is about 9 miles away, and that romance budded into marriage, to 4 children, and we have been married 58 years, and I'm so blessed to have him. I am glad I married a farmer, one without a college education, but to marry him, I had to promise my mother I would try to get him to go to college. Well, he chose Clemson University. He stayed there exactly 2 days. 1 day up, 1 day back. He called me, he said, "I've been in the service, I'm not standing in lines anymore, and if you can't marry me, that's too bad, because I'm on my way home." And I says, "Come on, we'll get married anyhow." And he went on to be successful, and in fact, he was partners with Leila's husband, Jim. And they stayed in the trucking business for quite a few years. And then after Jim retired, he sold his part out to Carlisle. And he's been down there running the grain company ever since. And we've had a good life together. And I just love him too, like Leila loved Jim. But I've been so blessed because I still have him after 58 years. Now, do you want to tell something else? Or Farrell, do you have any type of questions you would like to?
Oh, I can tell about Alicia Rett.
Show a picture
Yeah.
and talk about. Tell me about this picture.
But Alicia,
Mm-hmm.
I knew Alicia when we went to New York together on the train to the Schenectady, New York, to the Mohawk Drama Festival, and there they taught you acting and all the parts that went along with acting, and that's how I met her. But she was going by train, and I was but 15 years old at the time, or 16, and my mother would not let me go on the train by myself, so she went down and contacted Alicia, and Alicia said she would be glad for me to go along with her. She was very kind and a sweet lady. And so I went with Alicia to Schenectady, and we stayed up there about 3 months for the summer. We stayed in a boys' college in the wintertime. It was a winter college, and it was out for the summer, so we got to stay there for the summer. And that's how I met her. And after that, she went out to California, and she played in Gone with the Wind. She played India Wilkes, the sister to Ashley. And she wrote me a card or two while she was out there. And then I lost contact with her. And then here, about 3 or 4 years ago, I heard that she was in Charleston in one of the nursing homes. So Emily Lynn, my other daughter, I was there visiting with her. And she took me to see Alicia. And we went to see her, I guess, about half a dozen times. And then Alicia was 98 years old. And then she died in 1915. And she was such a dear friend and such a sweet lady. I enjoyed her so much. And I wanted to tell, too, about the cotton gin. We had a cotton gin in here that used to make cotton bales and put them out there across the street from me. And we would play, the children loved to jump those cotton bales one to the other. And we also had grapes that were ripened on the grapevine. And we'd come and pick grapes and go back and sit on the cotton bales and eat the grapes. And then we would play some more on the cotton bales. We would jump and play and hide and have a big time playing on those cotton bales.
Did you also do that, Jean?
I did.
Yeah.
I played on them too. That was our entertainment.
My dad probably was in that mix too.
He was. We used to go to, every afternoon, Gordon McCullough would come through Salters in this blue truck with a bed on the back. Not a bed you sleep in, but it was a flat bed. And all the children and young people in the community would jump on that truck and go to Black River. And back then, we would tie a rope over a limb and put a tire on it. And we would swing out over the river, and we would hold our nose and jump in the river, and we had many, many days of fun doing that. But we didn't have swimming pools like they do today. But
that was in Robinson's Hole.
that was Robinson Hole and
Weenie Beach.
Weenie Beach, yes, Basil's Beach it was called, and they had a pavilion down there, and they had dances, and it burned, didn't it, Leila? It burned,
down.
and so we had more fun as children than they do today. So do you have another thing?
Well, it was safe. It was safe back then for children to go out in the woods and play in the streams and skate and ride horses and ride bicycles, and you never thought anything would happen to them. But this day and time, it's so entirely different. It's dangerous for a child to go out in the woods to play or go away from home and stay off where you don't know where they are at every minute now, because things have gotten dangerous.
Were you afraid of stepping on a snake? I didn't
No,
think
no,
about a
we-
snake.
We never worried about snakes or ticks or bedbug. Those would be
What about alligators?
No, we didn't worry about anything.
we just
We
went,
were
just had a big time.
Footloose and fancy
Oh,
free.
my goodness. You were farm girls.
That's
You
right.
laughing at my bedbugs. Well, we didn't have those. But they did have ticks in the woods. You did get ticks on you if you weren't careful.
Yeah.
But my two girls would go down there and play in the streams and come back, and I wouldn't even know where they were. But there was one man that lived in Salters named Mr. Bert Mosley, and he had a fish pond down the railroad track somewhere. I never had even seen it till this day. And they would go, they'd say, I'm going down to Mr. Bert's fish pond today. And they would go down there and play all day, and I wouldn't worry about them a minute, but I wouldn't even let them go this day and time if they were little.
Oh, yeah.
So what was the age range? My James and Farrell were between the two of you in ages?
Well, we had a brother that drowned.
Yes,
His
Jazz.
name was Marion. And he went on a fishing trip one morning down to Santee, and that night the car was still there, and they notified Joanne, his wife, and they called in a search party, and it was just really cold that night. And Jim, I think, went with Carlisle, and they searched, and it was 3 weeks before the water warmed up enough for the body to rise to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So they called in all the wildlife rescue squad and put a net across the river down there so that the body wouldn't float out to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But we had Marion as our brother, and he was probably closer to James and Farrell, your dad and your uncle. And do you know any stories about James and Farrell that we can tell about Aunt Leila, Farrell's grandmother?
I remember that James and Farrell were up here one day, and they were out there where the hothouse is, where my grandmother kept flowers, and in fact Adrian still keeps flowers in it. It's still there. And they were out there playing, and they had a little, what kind of gun did they have? A little
BB gun.
The little BB gun. And then they decided that they would see if they could shoot through the glass windows on the hothouse and see if they would not break them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they shot out, I don't know how many glass windows with their guns.
Well,
Someone
can you
got
tell?
a whipping, I think. Did someone get a whipping for that?
I don't remember whether they got a
Did
whipping or
you? Could you tell about when they crawled up in the store and found the Civil War?
not. Who found them?
James and Farrell and Monroe shooting
Well,
it.
after the war was over, this regiment came by. They left civil
War.
civil guns in the store, left several boxes of them, and people would keep coming by after that. They just helped themselves to those guns, and finally one day Marion and 3 of his friends went up there and looked, and it wasn't but about 8 guns left, so he took them and brought them out and sorted them out. I think Jean got some, and I got 2 or 3, and
I got 2.
well, I don't know how many he found, but he found a lot of them still up there. And we,
I think
Divided.
Farrell McCullough and James McCullough, they were twins, and they were in that group that went up there, and
found them.
and they were daring somebody to shoot
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Tell about when they shot the gun.
They were daring somebody to shoot it. And a friend named George David was along with them. And I don't know whether they drew a number or what, but anyway, George David was finally picked up to shoot the gun. So they packed some powder in it, and George got up there and stood up to shoot the gun, and the gun backfired or did something and knocked him down and scratched him all up from shooting the Revolutionary War. Is that the war?
And I guess they were taken from the Union soldiers after the war.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had told me, Leila, that the Union soldiers were here and everybody was getting nervous that they were walking around with these guns. So they took them away from the Union soldiers after the war.
Oh, they did?
And then
They
they were put up in the store.
In the store. I don't remember exactly.
Maybe
how
my
they
dad
got
told
that.
me that.
That's what happened, and
Yeah.
also it would be our great granddaddy that was my Maddie's daddy was in the war. So you tell about when he came home.
This is his picture here. And when the war was over, he was left at Appomattox Courthouse. And he didn't have any way home, so he just got out and started walking. And he walked all the way from Appomattox Courthouse into Bennettsville, where his family was living at the time. And when he got almost home, they came running out when they saw him. They were so delighted because they really didn't know whether he was living or dead. And so they ran out to greet him, and he said, "No, don't come near me. I'm nasty and dirty. I haven't had a bath." And said, "I'm just too bad shape for you to even hug me." And said, "Please go and get me a tub full of hot water and put it at the edge of the woods and bring me some clean clothes, and I'll change, and then we'll greet each other." So that's what he did. He went in the woods and bathed and put on some clean clothes and came, and of course they had a big reunion together because they didn't, as I said, they didn't know whether he was living or dead. But he was living, and they were so happy over it.
And he walked home.
He walked all the way from Appomattox Courthouse.
And that was in Marlboro County
Mm-hmm.
that they were living at the time.
Yeah, that was in Bennettsville.
Bennettsville.
Uh-huh.
And there's a cemetery up there in Tatum where I think maybe he is buried.
He is married. He and Kitty Bethea. Kitty Bethea, died when she had her seventh child. She was very young, but she had 6 children, and when she had the seventh one, she didn't get over it, and she died. And that's when John Hicks Hamer. Is that it? No, Daniel Hicks Hamer.
No, John.
Is John? Which one is it? Do you know?
John.
John Hicks Hamer moved up to Salters and brought his 6 children up here, and that's how the family got started up here in Baltimore, in Williamsburg County.
Well,
And I got
he
one more little story to tell, and then I'll be through. It was during the war, and it was a soldier that was wounded, and he was lying on the field where they had been fighting, and he was hollering for help, and he would holler for help, and not too far away was a goat, and he'd holler, and the goat would say bah, and he would holler again, and the goat would say bah. He would holler for help, but I don't know whether he ever got help or not. But my Uncle James used to tell that story.
a thing of interest too on Farrell is Maddie Hamer, our grandmother. She ran a boarding house and kept all the teachers that taught at the Salter School. And a lot of them met some of the local men around here and married. And she had, it wasn't a slave quarter, but it had houses in the yard that the Kelly, her handyman, and Mama, who was the lady that did the cooking? Rosanna.
And Mama,
And Kelly.
Mama was James's nurse. She took care of him when he was.
Well, they lived on the property
Yeah,
right
they
here,
did.
next to the
They
big house.
had houses in the backyard that they lived in.
And they would come in and prepare the meal. When they prepared the meal in the kitchen part in the house that was in the yard, they would bring it to the table in the dining room.
Mm-hmm.
That was before they added on the kitchen, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well,
Kitchen was in the back.
and also Maddie Farrell,
Mm-hmm.
she had two daughters and two sons, and the James Lurid Farrell, he died at the age of 6, and when she had the other boy, she also named him James Lurid Farrell, and then she had
Well, that was your mother's brother.
mhm.
Okay.
and she had your grandmother,
Mhm.
Leila Farrell McCullough,
Yeah.
and she had our mother, Emmy Farrell Gordon, Emmy Gordon Farrell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you ever live in the house with Maddie, in the same house together?
I did.
You did have.
Then you got married, didn't you? You went to work.
I lived there as a child with her. I was like 8 years old when Maddie died.
Mm-hmm. And you remember
And she
her.
died with leukemia. Oh, how well I remember her. She was a lady that liked organization, and I was a child that liked to make houses out of pasteboard boxes. And I had a friend, and we would make a little city. And Maddie would come in and look at my mom, and she would say, "Emmy, you've got to do something with that child. She's got my living room all messed up." And that's not a very good thing to remind me of her, but that's my memory. As she was correcting me, and it's a good thing she did, because I needed correcting. And I was a spoiled brat. Leila was a lovely little girl that she just did what they told her to do, and she's still that way today. Very, very sweet lady.
So Maddie was a tough grandmother. She didn't spoil you.
She didn't. She spoiled this one.
Yeah.
She may have been tough on Jean, but she wasn't tough on me.
She was old when I came along, and she was cranky.
Well, I asked her one day, I said, Mama, we called her Mama and Mother. And I called I said, Mama, who is your favorite grandchild? And she looked at me, she said, well, after all, I raised you.
And I like to tell the story that when my mom had her and brought her back at 1 year old, that she was holding on to my grandmother's coattail ever since, and she hadn't turned loose yet.
Now, did
I'll
she
hold
ever
on to
talk
it
about
again
James
someday.
Allurid, her husband that had passed away? Did she ever talk about him?
Did she tell you anything about Papa?
Oh yeah, they said he was a very fine man, and said after he had a stroke, he died with a stroke, but he had one earlier. And when one of the children would be sick and upstairs in the bed with a bad headache, he would crawl up those steps to go see how they were. And he was very kind.
He was older than her.
And he was 18 years older than my grandmother.
He ran the store, which was called the Mercantile, and also he had sort of like
A broker, like a broker, wasn't he? Is that
well,
what you
no,
call
he had groceries, and he had all types of meat, like butts meat and hog joel and all the different things that you would get. We had more pork than we had beef, but back then he ran the store, and they had like a drugstore, a little section in there that they mixed the drugs and sold the cough syrup and different things. And I have some of the bottles in my barn that
Yeah.
that they
The old
used.
medicine bottles.
And he would lend money to the people in the community that were not able to buy or give them groceries if they were in need.
Now, as a family living in Salters, did you feel like you were financially well off compared to others around you?
we were really well off. We had a bathroom, and we had a shower, and we had a bathtub, and
Plumbing and electric
and
in the
we
house.
did, and I think maybe we were the first ones in this community to have a TV
And a car, right?
and a car.
What's the
Oh
story on the
yes,
car?
we had a uncle that was a car dealer. He had a dealership here, and he got the first car in the community, and it was shipped by rail. And his name was Uncle Tracy,
Trait.
and they called it, what was his name? Trait.
Trait. They called
Trait.
it Trait.
And we called him, we didn't know him, we called him Uncle Tracy. And he got the car, and all the people in the community came to look at it. And James, our Uncle James Farrell, was riding in the car, and he looked at him and he said, "Uncle Tracy, I can run faster than this car can roll." And so he stopped the car and he said, "James, get out and we will see." So James started to run, and he pressed the pedal, and the car passed James, and he sat down in the middle of the street, and he told me this tale, and he was always telling tales.
Now that would be your mother's brother
Yes,
that raced the car.
James
James
Alured
Yeah.
Farrell, and he would be Mother's and Aunt Leila's brother.
Yeah.
And the car was called a Rio.
Yes, the car was called a Rio.
Well, James Allure would be their father, I guess, and
He was. That,
James Farrell would be their brother. I don't
yes,
know. Yeah. What was his middle name? Did he have a middle?
Alured.
Both. So he was a junior then.
Mm-hmm.
Oh goodness.
Well, really, he was
How did
the
you keep it
third.
all straight?
Really, he was the third.
Because you have Jasper,
We had the
Marion.
father. We had the father, James Alured, and then they had the little Jim that died,
Mm-hmm.
and his name was James Alured. And after he died, then Mama, our grandmother, named the next son James Alured, and so it was.
Do you know the
really
story of
three.
Leila getting bitten by the dog in the face and causing her eye to go off?
They had an eye operated on, and then they got it kind of pulled a little bit the other way. It went in the corner, I think, and they pulled it.
Did a dog bite it?
I didn't know that.
Bennett asked me about that too, and I couldn't remember the dog,
I
being.
thought maybe it was like that.
Have you seen pictures of her with her eye going off in a different direction?
Mhm.
And I asked Bennett, and he said that it was because a dog bit her in the face.
And when they operated on it, they pulled it a little bit too far the other way. That's why it never was perfect. Never was a perfect
Well,
operation.
Aunt Leila, your grandmother, was really a worker. She would go in the morning and get all the hands to put in tobacco, and Uncle Mac, your granddaddy, was one of seven.
Mm-hmm.
One of seven sisters. And they tell the story that they went to school in the buggy, and the sisters would have to warm the bricks and wrap them in a blanket so he could put his feet on them and they wouldn't get cold. So,
Because he was the
When-
only boy.
right, and when your grandmother, Aunt Leila, told my grandmother and her mother that she was going to marry Mac McCullough, my grandmother went to bed for a week because she said, "He's been raised by 7 sisters and he's spoiled rotten, and you will have to wait on him the rest of your life."
Oh my goodness, that's great.
I've got a story to tell about him now. He had a cow that had a little calf, and it was out in the lot in the barn, and he went out there in the lot, and he walked between the cow and the calf, and the old big cow, it had horns, and it hooked him and almost killed him,
Mhm.
and he had to go to the hospital, and he was drinking at the time, and after that he never did drink anymore. he quit drinking, and he wouldn't drink anything or eat anything that had whiskey in it.
He decided.
But he was in one hospital, and at the same time Betty was sick. She was a little baby, and she was sick in the other hospital. And Mother would go and sit with one a while, and then the other, and give Leila a little rest to go and see both of them.
But they were fine people. We loved Uncle Mac and Aunt Leila.
Yeah, Uncle Mac
And he
a
was
lot of fun.
so good-hearted. When I got married, he gave me money to buy some furniture, and I was just thrilled to death. But I would drive him back and forth to Sumter when he had doctor's appointments. But I can truthfully say that Uncle Mac and Aunt Leila were fine people, and they were married for many years, and my grandmother was wrong about that because they loved each other.
You know, I can remember meeting your mother. You know that. I remember your mother, and she was lively, full of energy, and she talked about going to the baseball games. And she said, I love to go to those baseball games. I'll go to every one of them. And I get right in there and I cheer them on. And I love it. And she just went on about loving the baseball games.
She loved any type of sports.
I think she was in her 90s, I think.
She was. And she told me, I went to the baseball game Sunday in Columbia, and we were up in the box because Renee had VIP tickets, and she invited me and Carlisle. But Mother told me before she died, she said, the only thing I didn't get to do was go to any of the ball games and go to the stadium. She said, I would love to have been in the crowd with the Carolina students cheering them on.
Yeah.
But I'm like her. I love sports. I'm into them.
So your favorite sport is baseball?
Well, I played basketball at Carolina when I was going up there. So I like basketball, and I like all of them, except I could never play tennis. Every time I would hit the ball, it would go so far we never found it.
Now, what about you, Leila? Did you play sports?
No, I didn't care for me, but I was like Jean. I had a time with the tennis ball. I did happened to hit it one time, and it went so far, it was woods on the other side, and we never did even find the ball. And I just didn't like it at all.
No, she does not like sports. She likes to be pretty, and she likes to paint her fingernails. She just had a manicure.
It's beautiful.
For $10.
Beautiful. Now, you were acting in the Dockside Theater in Charleston?
It was the Victory Theater that I played the lead in one show there called On the Bridge at Midnight. And,
sounds romantic.
I went there to rehearsal one night, and the director said, I want you to kiss the leading man, and I just want to see, how it's going to work out at a certain place in the play. And so I kissed him, and he finally said, well, break. And so we did, and he said, how long was that? Well, I had a boyfriend too, and he was in the audience just waiting for me to get through so we could go off together. And when they said, how long was that? He says, a lifetime.
So you had
Was
to
that
kiss
your
him?
first kiss?
No, that wasn't the first kiss.
Oh. Who was your first kiss?
I guess it was Willard Odom.
Did you go say HP?
No, it wasn't HP.
Willard Odom. Oh.
So how long were you an actress in the theater?
Well, I don't know how long I was down there. I was I had the lead in that play at the Victory Theater. That was an old theater they had there that they had plays in. I think it's demolished now. And I played another one. It was a murder picture that I played in that one. And it wasn't the lead, but I had a right good role in it. And then when I was in Columbia, Carolina, I was in one play that the Daniel Green Theater, and I played the part of a maid. And after the play was over one day, the director walked up to me and he said, "You must have been a real good friend of one of these reporters." And I said, "Why was that?" And he said, "Well, he gave you such a good write-up for you playing the part of the maid. He gave you a very good write-up."
You did play at Dock Street too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I was in
Dock
one
Street,
of Dock
and
Street.
that's still
I
there.
played in Dock Street too,
Mhm.
not the lead, but.
Did you want to be a full-time actress and go through an
Oh, I
entire?
wanted to be an actress real bad. I just
Yeah.
love that. And I used to be in the different contests where we would give readings, get up and give readings from the different counties. And I run third place for in Columbia. I had to go to Columbia and give a reading down to there. And I got third place for the whole state.
Do you remember any of your lines from back then? That might be a hard question, but
Yeah. I was trying to think, but I'd have to think for a while with that.
yeah. But you did get a kiss on camera.
Yeah, I had to kiss. And he was good looking too.
Good look, I bet he
I liked
was.
his looks. I liked his looks better than I did what I was going with. It said it was a lifetime.
Did you have dreams of going to Hollywood?
Oh yeah. We went to New York one time with a man that lived across the road in the house sitting there now. And he went and we went with him in his car. And Mother looked up the people that would give me to give me a what do you call it, to check me out, in other words. And they said, "Well, if you're going to be here next week, we'll give you
Audition?
an audition." That's right.
Mhm.
And but we weren't going to be there the next week. And of course, we were with this band that we went, he and his wife, we went with. And so we had to come home. So we came home and I didn't get my audition.
Well, tell the story about that man coming up to the house. Mr. Maynard.
Oh,
You tell that. You were there, weren't you? You were there.
yes. My dad ran a sawmill here in Salters. He had the brothers that ran the one in Charleston, the Sawyer's Lumber Company, and he would cut the trees and saw the boards and put them in a kiln and dry them, and then he would plane them, and they would be finished lumber that would be shipped to Charleston, and then they in turn would sell them to build houses with. But he had a man working for him that was named Paul Maynard, and he lived across the tracks. And Daddy and Mr. Felkel, who was a friend of my mom and dad's, and his wife, Miss Hattie Mae, they were real good friends. They were sitting in the living room, and we saw somebody come, and I was in there too, and we saw someone come to the door, and he was standing up like he was drunk, and he was calling out all kind of profanity, and they said, "Jump up and lock the door, don't let him in." And back then, it was just a skeleton key with a lock that would come off. So after it was locked, he hit up against the door with his weight from his body, and it came wide open, and he came in and started calling my daddy all kind of names, and I must have been 8 years old, and I was terrified. And he got ready to ball up his fists and hit my daddy, and my daddy was a big man, so he balled up his fists, and he hit Paul Maynard, and Paul Maynard went through the window and landed on the porch. And they were trying to calm him down, and he started running Mr. Felkel, who was with the crowd, the four of them and me. And after all of this happened, they called the policeman or the patrolman, and he came and calmed him down, and I think he may have taken him to jail. But the next thing was the search for the glasses. Mr. Felkel had lost his glasses running away from misdemeanor. And they weren't found that night, but the next morning I went out in the yard, and in a bush right by the house was the glasses hanging up on the limb. So we found his glasses, but we had a lot of excitement in Salters, and we just were family.